So as I started my MFA program and had to decide what I was going to do my series of works on and what they were going to be like and everything, I kept being told that they couldn't just be pretty, there had to be meaning and purpose behind them, and that I even needed to think about the materials I was using and the imagery, symbolism, like what it all was there for. And I had in recent times just been really struck by how fragile peace is. It's something that many of us take for granted if we've never lived somewhere where war has been at our doorstep, but it just can be taken like this. My dad at the time was working in international law, and he was literally on the phone with colleagues in Ukraine one day, and then the next day couldn't get a hold of them because they had grabbed their families and were fleeing their country, their homes, for their lives, running from the Russian army. It just, their whole world had changed just like that. And then on October 6th, 2023, I was celebrating the last night of Sukkot with my family, and my elderly grandma, totally unprompted, just expressed her gratitude out loud for the state of Israel. She said she was so grateful that there would always be one place where Jews would be welcome and safe. Let that sink in for a second, because the next morning we woke to the news of Hamas's deadly attack in Israel, where 1,200 people were killed and hundreds were taken hostage right out of their homes, many of them. The irony or the juxtaposition of her comment about it being safe and what had just happened really sunk in, and those words stuck with me. And so I decided to use that fragility as part of my series. I decided to create these embroidered watercolors. Now, embroidery uses thread, and thread is so fragile. It frays, it disintegrates over time, it fades, it can easily be ripped or cut apart. And yet, thread is something that we use to bind, to repair, to stitch together, to hold things together. So it's both fragile and it's strong. And for this was the first artwork that I did as part of this series. And this one was about peace. It's called Peace Under the Vine and the Fig Tree. And so I'm using that thread throughout there as that symbol. Peace is so fragile, it is weak, it can be taken in a second, and yet it can be such a strength. It is such an important ideal to shoot for in our lives. The top section of the painting represents failed attempts of peace at the past. Conflict in the Middle East, especially around Israel, is not new. It's thousands of years old. It's incredibly complicated, and so many times peace talks, negotiations have failed. And so this piece of paper, this unfinished painting of an olive branch is torn, it's ripped, it's burned, it's really poorly stitched back together, just representing all those failed attempts. When maybe one or both sides wasn't being totally sincere, realistic, when there was greed or dishonesty that stood in the way of peace being accomplished. Below that hangs this middle section, which is a painting of a fig tree and a vine. And the imagery for this comes from Micah 3:4-3, which reads, "Nation shall not lift up a sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. But they shall sit every man under his vine and under his fig tree, and none shall make them afraid." This ideal seemed perfect to represent what real peace would look like. The idea that you would feel so safe that you could just sit and relax under the shade of your own vine and fig tree is in there. I've stitched the vine around and used glass beads. I've used satin thread and glass beads to represent that peace is worth all of our best efforts, using kind of those best materials there throughout. The fig tree is also a perfect representation there because it's an incredibly important tree. It feeds around 1,274 mammals and birds around the world, far more than any other type of fruit. It's featured in every major religion and mythologies in the Amazon, Africa, all over the world. And in Judaism, it's seen as a symbol of peace and prosperity. From this ideal hangs a real olive branch that's been preserved there, just representing what we can do. How can we bring more peace into the world? We may not be able to affect things in a faraway country. We may not be able to make a huge difference on the world scene, but where can we make a difference? How can we be peacemakers? How can we promote and seek peace? And are we doing that, or are we destroying it? And what is the cost of peace? The fig tree was a really interesting tree to use here, as fig trees are found throughout the world, and they're in fact featured in mythologies and religious texts all around the world, from the Amazon, in Africa, Mediterranean, Middle East, in the Himalayas, the South Pacific. It feeds an incredible amount of animals, and just this universality of it brings to mind the fact that peace is valued and needed by all people around the world. This isn't just an issue in one place. This is something, an ideal that all people seek for. And from that middle section hangs a real olive branch that has been preserved. Olive branches, again, being a symbol of peace being offered. And it is there. The top section is failed attempts at peace. The middle section is ideal peace. This bottom olive branch is there to have viewers ask, what are we doing to contribute to peace to the world? We may not be able to affect peace on a global scale or in a faraway country, but we can be peacemakers in our homes, in our schools, in our communities. Peace is an ideal worth working for. It is worth our very best efforts. How can we put forth the olive branch and bring more peace into our lives?